You saw someone across the room, maybe at a party, maybe on the street, maybe somewhere completely ordinary, and something happened. Not a decision, not a thought. Something faster than both. Your body responded before your brain had time to form a single word about it. Most people call that attraction. Science has a different name for it. What science calls it is a cascade, a sequence of neurochemical events that begins in regions of the brain so old they predate language, predate thought, predate almost everything we consider specifically human. The part of you that responds to attraction is not the part of you that reads books or makes decisions or plans for the future. It is something much older, and it is considerably more powerful than anything that came after it. The first thing that happens is dopamine. Not a little dopamine, a surge. The same neurotransmitter involved in motivation, reward, and critically, addiction. When you encounter someone your brain classifies as attractive, the ventral tegmental area, a small cluster of neurons near the base of the brain, begins producing dopamine at levels significantly above baseline. That dopamine floods the nucleus accumbens, the brain's primary reward center, and produces a sensation that is neurochemically almost identical to the anticipation of a reward you haven't received yet. This is important. The dopamine spike is not about pleasure, it is about wanting. The neuroscience distinguishes carefully between liking and wanting, between the experience of pleasure and the drive to pursue. Attraction, at its neurological core, is wanting, an intense, focused, biological imperative to move toward a specific person. The feeling of pleasure comes later. What hits first is the pull. Within the first moments of attraction, a second chemical enters the picture, norepinephrine, the same neurotransmitter released during states of danger, excitement, and acute stress. Heart rate increases, pupils dilate, palms may begin to sweat, breathing changes. The body is running a response that evolved for survival situations, the fight or flight system, but redirected entirely toward a person standing across the room. This is why attraction feels so much like anxiety. At a neurochemical level, the two states are almost identical. The brain is using the same hardware for both. The only difference is the direction of the response. The amygdala is central to all of this. The region most associated with emotional processing and threat detection becomes highly active during attraction. Researchers at University College London found that when people viewed images of romantic partners, amygdala activity was significantly elevated. The amygdala is assessing, is this person safe? Is this person significant? Is this person worth the biological cost of pursuing? These questions are not being asked consciously. They are being processed in milliseconds, below the threshold of awareness. And the outputs surface as feelings, excitement, nervousness, that specific quality of attention that makes a crowded room narrow to a single point. Cortisol rises too, the stress hormone. Early attraction measurably elevates cortisol levels, a finding that initially confused researchers until they understood what it represented. The body is mobilizing resources, preparing for something that matters. The elevated cortisol is not distress, it is investment. The biological signature of the brain, deciding that this situation is important enough to dedicate significant resources to. And then, if the attraction is reciprocated, if the interaction develops, oxytocin begins to enter the system. The bonding hormone, the neurochemical most associated with trust, attachment, and the specific kind of comfort that comes from proximity to someone you want near you. Oxytocin doesn't arrive with the initial attraction. It builds. It accumulates through touch, through sustained eye contact, through the repeated experience of being near someone your brain has already marked as significant. This is why early attraction feels electric and unstable. Oxytocin hasn't arrived yet. The system is running on dopamine and norepinephrine, which are by their nature urgent and restless. Oxytocin is what eventually softens the urgency into something that can last. Serotonin tells a different story. Researchers studying people in the early stages of romantic attraction found that serotonin levels dropped significantly, 2 levels comparable to those observed in people with obsessive-compulsive disorder. The intrusive thoughts, the inability to stop thinking about someone, the way they occupy mental space that should be available for other things. This is not a metaphor, it is a measurable neurological state. The brain, flooded with dopamine and depleted of serotonin, enters a mode of focused, repetitive, involuntary attention that functions, mechanically, like an obsession. You cannot think about anything else because the brain is not allowing it. The system has flagged this person as a priority, and it is allocating cognitive resources accordingly. What this neurochemical profile adds up to is something that sits uncomfortably against the romantic narratives most people carry. Attraction is not a choice. It is not a reflection of your values, or your judgment, or your character. It is a biological event produced by systems that evolved hundreds of millions of years before any of those things existed. The cascade begins before conscious thought. It operates on timescales the conscious mind cannot access, and it produces feelings so intense, so physically real, so difficult to reason against, that humans have written about them as forces of nature, for as long as writing has existed. The uncomfortable question the neuroscience raises is not whether attraction is real. It is clearly real, measurable, reproducible, consistent across cultures and populations. The question is, who is doing the feeling? When the dopamine surges, and the heart rate climbs, and the attention narrows to a single person across a room, is that you? Or is that a system running inside you that predates you by several 100 million years, using you as its vehicle, toward ends that have nothing to do with your happiness and everything to do with reproductive imperatives? You inherited from ancestors who never thought about any of this at all. You saw someone across the room, something happened faster than thought. That something has been happening, in one form or another, since before your species had a name for it, and it is happening still, every time, in exactly the same way, in the same brain regions, through the same chemical cascade, producing the same feeling that has been called by 100 different names in 100 different languages across the entire span of human history. None of those names are quite accurate, but attraction comes close.